Hey folks, how's it going? Dr. Spin. Eclectic album reviews and general musical meanderings. I have another roundup post for you this time around, but the rules are going to be a little bit different. This is mid-year, so it marks an opportunity for me to kind of just to put a bunch of new music in the hat and see what comes to the surface. And I decided, because of kind of the recent turn of things and my own interest in supporting black music, I was going to only purchase and support music from black artists for this next couple of posts coming up. And that includes my roundups. So all of the music that you are going to have going forward for this post is all by black artists. And I kind of came by them by different means. Okay, the first one, actually, you have to forgive me a little bit, because the first one, Run the Jewels 4 from Run the Jewels, is actually, they're a biracial group. But I figure that you probably can kind of give LP a pass. I think he gets it, right? So Run the Jewels 4 was actually on my wish list before any of this went down. I had purchased it before then. And but right around the time whenever the George Floyd riots were happening, the album had come out. I think they put it out a little bit early as part of the response to that. And I went ahead and got it at that time. And even though the actual recording of this album was made, technically 6 to 9 months ago, it could not be timelier. So much of the lyrics and so many of the topics that they talk about on the album are things that are completely relevant to what's been happening with the past month in just the race relations in the U.S. right now. So it's a very, very timely, very topical album that I think that really marks a lot of the high points of what's been going on. A good musical representation of that. Beginning to end, all bangers. Great tracks from the beginning to end. They're all super catchy. The beats are varied, very hard, very intense. And the production is ridiculous. It's a really, really big, expansive sounding album, and has lots of really great guest appearances on it. The one that really stuck out to me almost immediately was when Zach De La Rocha shows up on the song Just.
Master of these politics, you swear that you got options. Master of opinion, cause you vote with the white collar. The 13th Amendment says that slavery's abolished. Yeah. Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar. Get it?
Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar.
Get it?
Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar.
Get it?
Look at all these slave masters posing on your dollar.
Get it?
Look at all these slave masters.
I mean, you can't miss De La Rocha's voice. It's so distinctive. It brings Rage Against the Machine kind of right back to mind. And it matches very well with the energy and the intensity of Killer Mike as well. So you can kind of go toe-to-toe with those guys, and it fits well with the intent of their music. I am very picky about the amount of hip-hop that I've listened to in the past, and try to be more open to it now. But every now and then I'll get an album that really it seems to stick out for one reason or another. And Run the Jewels 2 was one of them a few years ago. I feel like Run the Jewels 4 is one that may stick out this year as a particularly important album in reference to everything that's been going on. So, well worth checking out. So after I got that album and I kind of started getting into it, I looked at where I was going to go next. I didn't really want to go out and just buy all the newest hip-hop stuff. That wasn't really the way I wanted to go. So I started doing some research into experimental black artists. I just Googled that and started seeing what came up. And I came across some really, really interesting things along the way. So one of the ones that I got off that search was Damon Locks and the Black Monument Ensemble, When Future Unfolds. What I started finding as I kind of looked into kind of black experimental music, a couple of really characteristic things started to kind of emerge. Lots of spoken word, lots of pretty intense jazz stuff. That kind of, those two things kind of come up a lot when you start talking about experimental black music, African-American music. If you're really looking for the more exploratory aspects of black music in the U.S., a lot of those are reflected in the Damon Locke recording here. Damon Locke himself is an interdisciplinary guy, as are many of these artists going forward. He's a visual artist, he's an educator, he's a singer, he's a DJ. It's kind of his bag. And he put together this group, this ensemble of singers and drummers and jazz players and all a choir, a children's choir, and created this performance piece called the Black Monument Ensemble. They'd done some performances around the U.S. here and there, but this particular one is a live recording of them performing in Chicago.
The words are not peaceful, separate, not equal. Power to the government.
So one of the things that really caught me about this immediately is that there's this kind of like DJ-ish loop structure to this song with the backing beat that has kind of sounds like a sample of like an African thumb piano or something like that, but at the same time has kind of spiritual inspired vocals, and some jazz playing in the background. So there's a lot of those components. And this recording also includes a lot of speeches, like audio clips of speeches, like what Public Enemy would used to do, and spoken word sections. So it kind of covers a lot of that experimental ground that I was kind of noticing keep coming up. I do like the album quite a bit. It's got a lot of really great moments in it. I think that in some cases, parts of this might go off better live than on the recording. There's kind of like a couple of, hey, join with me parts, from the stage, join with me. And because they get the audience participation involved, that kind of wears a little bit thin when you're listening to it just as a recording. But the material's great, and the performances are really great. So I would suggest the Blackout Monument Ensemble with a couple of caveats, and there's some things that kind of drag down because of the difference between playing in front of a live audience and playing for a recording. Okay. Now the next one was one that I almost thought whenever I discovered her that I kind of had run aground almost immediately. But Moor Mother's Analog Fluids of Solid Black Holes has ended up being a very, very fascinating album that at first, again, I thought was not going to work for me. Moor Mother's the stage name for Kemi Oweya, who is also a interdisciplinary artist. She's an artist and a poet and an educator, and also a sound artist. And this is part of her thing. She has this very interesting background where she kind of was in hip hop for a while and kind of was doing punk for a while, like real hardcore punk music. And she kind of came up with this project, Moor Mother. And again, this recording has a lot of spoken word to it, but it's very, very intense. It sound-wise, the sounds that she goes for, because they're influenced by punk and not really intended to be hip hop that you dance to, it comes almost off as like noise rock or industrial style. So the background is very buzzy, very, very distorted, very wall of sound. And her performances are very like dramatic and almost dire in their intensity.
For you, 5, 4, 3, 2, yo. And you don't wanna flow with the sun. The war's already been won. It's now the math of one. No shade, no sun, no bullet, no gun. Death or run, it's done. 1,000 miles in one. Yo, cause they don't wanna see me shine from the start to the finish line. They keep their head on the 9, cause it's only a matter of time. 5, 4, 3, 2. 5, 4, 3, 2. Cause after they come for me, they gon' come for you.
At first time I listened to it, I kind of felt like it was almost overly intense. And then I had this reaction like, well, look, earlier this year I was listening to some death metal stuff. And those guys are screaming in a voice that I can barely even understand. It's just a texture. And as I'm listening to it and thinking about what she's saying in her words, I'm like, those guys who are doing the death metal stuff, they're angry, okay? But what are they really angry about? What do they have to be angry about? Because in comparison to things that Moor Mother talks about in her music, the erasure of Black history and the way in which Black culture has to continue to pretend like the injustices that they suffer every day just don't happen and have to go on about their business, and very historically aware look at some of the ways in which Black culture has been canceled in the past. And she's very, very a lot of conviction in her delivery that really makes it intense and an eye-opening listen. So once I kind of opened myself up to it and listened to it, I'm like, okay, performance-wise, this is not going to be an easy listen. The words on that album are devastating. There are many devastating, incredible pieces of lyric work on that album that hit you strong in the chest, I think, upon really understanding part of what they're trying to convey. You have to look past the exterior on it and really get down to what she's trying to say. And it's very, very effective in that regard. So Moor Mother's Analog Fluids of Solid Black Holes is kind of the keeper out of this group. As I continued on this search for experimental African American artists, I discovered a project called African Sciences. And this album is one by him called Centered. African Sciences is the stage name for Eric Douglas Porter. And Eric Douglas Porter is a self-taught musician who his experimental side tends more towards more of a techno feel. the closest thing that I would compare Centered to is Hama's Houmeissa from last year, which is one of my favorite albums from last year. And Centered has that same kind of real polyrhythmic feel. It has also a bit more of an atmospheric side, but oddly less of a melodic side. This is an album that I find myself listening to a lot as I'm walking around, just kind of doing stuff. It's one of those ones that can be intellectually stimulating enough when you listen to it, but it can also kind of sit in the background. But it's more intense than just kind of ambient music. Finally, in looking for other kinds of black music outside of my normal ideas about what I would look for, I kind of took some suggestions from some viewers and some friends. So one of them is Shon Dervis is 16. And this one I discovered because he's actually the brother of a friend of mine who has watched a couple of my posts. I checked out his album, and usually it's always one of those things that's kind of nerve-wracking. Like you have a friend or a friend of a friend who has an album, and you listen to it and you're like, man, if I don't like it, how am I going to attend to that? Well, the good news is I actually really like this album. It's a very good DJ style album. Shon Dervis is a DJ, an old school kind of DJ, I get the impression. This album is kind of from the perspective of like a producer almost. It has the same kind of feel and vein of like DJ Shadow. But there's also lots of tracks on here with guest vocalists on there, which is fine. Actually, I, in some ways, kind of prefer the instrumental side of things. A lot of the guest artists on there, I don't feel like kind of detract from the feel of the album. What they're doing is fine. It's just, I really kind of like what Dervis is doing on his own for the most part. The instrumental work is really pretty fantastic. There's a couple spots where the loop is a little bit obvious, so it feels like it maybe goes on, or maybe this is a situation with the mixing, I'm not sure. But overall, the album is a great listen. Finally, I also had the suggestion to check out the Meters, Look at Pi Pi. And the Meters have been on my radar since the mid-90s. I first heard about the Meters as Harry Connick Jr.'s backing band during his She period. He had that funk album that he made there that was kind of in a lot of play for me personally for a while, and a lot of my friends were like, yes, the Meters. The Meters is the backing band. And so I did have a very distinctive feel in that album, and it's always been a group that's been in the back of my mind. I took this opportunity to go and add this disc to my collection, and it's been a great addition for sure. Multi-purpose. Actually, what I end up listening to this one very much in the morning when I first get up or trying to get the house rolling. It's got a very bright and bouncy feel to it. Also very deeply melodic, also very deep groove in it. And that's one of the things the Meters were super well known for, is their ability to cop riffs and grooves in a very locked in and compelling way. In a way that you hear even now in groups like Wolfpack and the sort of new wave of funk music that's coming out here all has roots back to the Meters. And I didn't realize this, but this album is 1969, 1970, a lot older than I thought it was. And the Meters have had a very interesting long history since then that's worth its own investigation for sure. But if you're looking for a place to start with the Meters, I think Look at Pi Pi is a good one. I don't have any other reference for them, but this is a great disc, and one that I really welcome the suggestion from the listener. So that's my 6 for this time around. I have another 6 coming up in a couple of weeks. Again, all black artists, many of them experimental, and were very eye-opening, and ones that I think will also be ones that represent artists that I'm going to be sticking with for a while. Okay, but next week I'm going to be coming with a single album review, whatever I happen to be listening to at the time. And until then, I'll catch you guys on the flip side.